Introduction. You are not lacking motivation. You are simply too cluttered in your mind. You are not broken, not lazy, and certainly not incapable. What you're missing is clarity. What you're missing is order. How many times have you sat alone, overwhelmed by everything you need to do, yet unsure where to begin? How many times have you been filled with dozens of ideas, hundreds of ambitions, only to let a day pass in exhaustion and distraction? You are not broken. This world is too loud, and you haven't yet learned how to turn it off. Stoicism is not a religion, nor is it a self-help trend. It is a mirror, placed squarely in the middle of a chaotic life, so you can look at yourself. No glamour, no divinity, only truth. Epictetus once said, "People are not disturbed by events, but by their judgments about those events." Stoicism doesn't teach you to avoid suffering. It teaches you to look it in the eye, without blinking. It doesn't promise you will always feel better, but it gives you a way to live without collapsing, even when everything around you is falling apart. The world doesn't need more people who live on impulse, chasing things beyond their control. What this world needs is you, steady, calm, and governed by reason. Not because you are numb, but because you have chosen to stay awake. 1. You don't need more motivation. You need order in your mind. It's easy to think you're lacking motivation, that if you just had a bit more inspiration, a little more passion, or the right motivational video at the right time, you'd get back in the game. But the truth is, you're not lacking motivation. You're tangled. Tangled in thoughts, tangled in choices, tangled between all the things you should do, want to do, have to do. And it is this mental chaos that tires you out more than any task ever could. Motivation is like the weather. It comes and goes. But you cannot build a stable life if you only act on the sunny days. Stoics know this. They don't wait for a positive feeling before they begin. They build a solid foundation from reason, from principle, from discipline. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to work." Not because he was enthusiastic, but because he chose to live with order, even when there was no motivation within. In today's world, where we are constantly bombarded by emails, deadlines, social media, social expectations, comparisons, and the fear of missing out, what's draining you is not the lack of passion, it is the lack of clarity. You wake up each morning pulled in every direction but your own. Stoicism teaches you to pause, to look directly inward, to choose one right thing and do it. Not out of excitement, but out of presence. Don't wait for motivation. Don't beg for inspiration. Don't live at the mercy of a mental state you cannot control. Instead, build yourself a system where you know what matters, what doesn't, what is worth doing, and what is merely noise. When your mind is in order, you no longer need to chase motivation, because at that point, you don't need to feel ready to begin. You just need to be ready to live. 2. It's not what happens, it's how you respond. 90% is on you. Life doesn't care whether you're tired, heartbroken, or still waiting to recover. Everything keeps moving. People continue to behave however they want. The deadline still arrives. The messages still come. And sometimes the very things you dread show up right when you're at your weakest. But here's the truth you need to accept. You cannot control most of what happens. What you can always control is how you respond. The Stoics call this inner power, the one thing no one can take from you unless you give it away. Epictetus once said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." A careless word does not have to make you angry. A rejection does not have to make you feel worthless. A judgmental glance does not have to turn into shame. In reality, you are not reacting to the situation. You are reacting to the way you interpret the situation. And that interpretation is shaped by how steady your inner world is. In a world dominated by quick judgment, emotional reactivity, and pressure to respond instantly, calm becomes a superpower. When your boss loses their temper, when your partner grows distant, when your project fails, when you are misunderstood, The first thing you want to do is strike back. But the first thing you need to do is breathe. Take a step back. Ask yourself, is this really worth losing my peace over? Not everyone who touches you deserves a reaction. Not every situation requires you to rush in. Action is not always your duty. Sometimes restraint is the wisest action of all. Life may take many things from you, but no one can ever take away your right to choose your response. And when you truly hold that right, you are no longer a victim. You are the master of yourself, and that is where true freedom begins. 3. Pain is proof that you are truly alive. No one likes pain, but pain is not always the enemy. It is a signal, a sign that you are still present with life. When you still feel pain, it means you haven't gone numb. It means you still care deeply enough about something to be wounded by it. In the modern world, people avoid pain by numbing themselves, scrolling endlessly, clicking next, burying themselves in work, eating without awareness, chasing half-hearted relationships. But the Stoics don't run from pain. They walk directly into it. They look squarely at loss, betrayal, failure, and heartbreak, and ask, what is this trying to teach me? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The obstacle is not in the way, it is the way." For others, failure is the end. For the Stoic, it is the first page of growth. You hurt after a breakup not because you're weak, but because you once loved sincerely. You hurt after losing a job not because you're incapable, but because you were invested. You hurt when others speak wrongly about you, not because you're fragile, but because you believe kindness would be understood. But pain does not mean defeat. It is a mental exercise. It is where you learn to stand while still trembling. It is where you learn to lift your head while pieces of you inside are still healing. In physical training, if you don't feel pain, you're not improving. The same is true in the life of the mind. If you feel no challenge, you might simply be standing still. The Stoics do not glorify pain. They simply refuse to let it rule them because they know pain is something to pass through, not a place to stay. And if you have the courage to stay with your pain long enough, it stops being punishment and becomes your teacher. 4. Failure is not the enemy. It's the first curriculum no one wants to fail. But the irony is, the strongest people you've ever met have all fallen. Not once, but many times. Failure doesn't make them special. It's how they stood back up afterward that's worth remembering. To those who live on the surface, failure is humiliation. But to the Stoic, it's the beginning of an inner transformation. Seneca once said, "We learn more in failure than we do in success, because only when things no longer go our way are we forced to turn inward and observe ourselves." You don't learn much from easy victories. You learn from the time you said the wrong thing and hurt someone you love, from the time you were overconfident and lost an opportunity, from the time you stood on a peak and fell because of one foolish decision. In today's world where people only share the highlights of their lives, failure feels like a stain. But the Stoic does not avoid that stain. They examine it carefully. They ask, where is this asking me to grow? Not all pain has meaning, but if you know how to look, you'll find a lesson in any failure. You may lose. You may hurt. You may lose your reputation, your finances, even your belief in yourself. But if you keep your ability to learn from those things, you've never truly lost everything. You are simply learning in a way school never taught you. Your failures are not sentences. They are reminders. You are missing something, and you're on the path to reclaim it. Success is not built on moments of being right, but on wrong turns transformed into wisdom. And the person who is no longer afraid to be wrong is the one who is beginning to truly understand themselves. Failure doesn't kill you. It teaches you to live with more seriousness. 5. The past is ruins, and worry is not an action. You are carrying things that no longer exist. Old conversations, mistakes you can't go back to fix, opportunities you missed out of fear, people who left without saying goodbye. The past is like a dusty room. You think you're stepping in just to look back, but then you stay, holding on to old souvenirs and asking why everything turned out this way. But the Stoic is different. They don't live in the past. They live in the present. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power only over this moment. Everything else is illusion." And that is a truth few want to hear. Because living in the present means you can't blame yesterday, can't cling to memory, and can't delay life with the phrase, if only. In modern life, where people constantly reminisce, compare, regret, and fear the future, your mind gets torn between two ends, one pulling you to what's already gone, the other to what hasn't yet come. The result, you don't truly live anywhere at all. Worry is like sitting on a rocking chair. You feel like you're moving, but you're going nowhere. Worry solves nothing. It only drains the energy you need to act. Stoicism doesn't tell you to stop thinking about the future. It only tells you not to let the future paralyze your present. You cannot change what has already happened. You also can't control what has yet to arrive. But you can always control one thing. What will I do right now? And that is the only question that truly matters. Because if you take care of the present well enough, the future will answer itself, and the past will stop haunting you, because you will have stopped haunting yourself. 6. You cannot fix anyone. Love without possession. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to change someone you love. You believe that if only they could open up more, listen more, change just a little, everything would be fine. You take on the responsibility of fixing, saving, reshaping them into the version you think is best. But what you don't realize is this: loving someone does not give you the right to rewrite them. Stoicism teaches that each person is an independent being. No one belongs to anyone, and control is the opposite of true love. Epictetus once said, "If you want others to live as you choose, you will always be disappointed. But if you accept them as they are, you will find peace." In modern life, we often confuse love with possession. We love, and at the same time, try to manage, correct, and control every behavior, every relationship, every thought of the other person. And when they don't change, we feel rejected. But the truth is, you are not being rejected. You're just trying to change something that was never yours to control. Real love does not demand that someone fits the mold you've drawn. It allows them to be free to be themselves, even when that makes you uncomfortable. That is not indifference. It is respect. And sometimes in letting go, you'll see more clearly which love is real and which love was simply obsession in disguise. Stoicism does not tell you to be indifferent or emotionally withdrawn. It teaches you to love without attachment, to care without demanding change, to choose companionship, not control, because you were not born to fix anyone. And true love does not require a soul surgery. It only needs a space where both people are free to grow or free to leave in peace. 7. Be honest with yourself, even when it hurts. There are things you know, yet pretend not to. You know you're procrastinating. You know that relationship is no longer healthy. You know the fire is gone from that job. You know your words yesterday caused someone pain, but you stay silent with yourself as if that silence might make the truth disappear. It doesn't. It stays. It lingers. And each time you look away, you slowly erode your own self-respect. Stoicism doesn't teach you to be harsh or cold. It only asks for honesty, not with the world, but with yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't lie to yourself. What's wrong is wrong, no matter how well you justify it." In a modern world where everything has a filter, images, emotions, relationships, telling the truth to yourself becomes an act of courage, because it means accepting that you've been selfish, that you've avoided, that you've failed, that you gave up when you should have fought. It hurts, but no real growth comes without pruning. You cannot move forward while telling yourself it's fine, when clearly it's not. And no one lies to you better than you. The Stoic is like a mirror. No judgment, no glamour, no concealment. It reflects only what is. And it is in that truth, whether it makes you ashamed, weary, or broken, that real change begins. When you are brave enough to face yourself, no justifying, no blaming, then you are no longer a victim. You are responsible. And from responsibility, you reclaim your power. Being honest with others is ethics, but being honest with yourself is liberation. 8. Your future self is hoping you won't give up. There are days when you see no reason to keep going. Everything feels blurred, your emotions are drained, and all your efforts seem to lead nowhere. You feel like you're walking but not arriving. But it is in those seemingly meaningless days that you are building something. Not for today, but for yourself. 6 months from now, a year from now. Every time you push through one more early morning, 1 hour of undistracted work, one kind conversation despite your exhaustion, you're saving your future self from breaking down. The Stoics called this responsibility between selves, the responsibility your present holds toward your future. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Act as if you were already dead, and each moment that follows is a gift." You think perseverance isn't making a difference because you measure it with your eyes. But real change doesn't show up daily. It accumulates, bit by bit, like water shaping stone. In today's world, people crave quick success, visible results, instant metrics. But nothing lasting ever comes quickly. Mental health, calmness, inner depth. These don't arrive in a few weeks. They come from the hundreds of times you chose not to give up when no one was watching. No one sees your persistence. No one applauds when you choose silence over anger. No one congratulates you for choosing honesty over convenience. But there is one person who will know everything. You. And your future self will be grateful. Because that version of you will have confidence, clarity, and self-mastery, not because they were born strong, but because you did the work today. Giving up is the unspoken promise that you'll leave the consequences for your future self to carry. And if you can't fight for who you are now, then fight for who you'll become, the one who will need you more than ever. 9. You're not a tree. If it's not working, move. You weren't born to stay stuck in one place just because it's familiar. You're not a tree. You have no roots in the ground, no permanent tie to barren soil. You have legs, a mind, and a heart capable of choosing again, redesigning, starting over. Yet many remain in jobs that drain them, in relationships that suffocate them, in cities that strip away their sense of self, because they fear that change might make things worse. What they don't see is refusing to change is what makes things quietly decay. The Stoics don't encourage you to run from difficulty. They encourage reasoned action. Seneca once said, "Life is too short to keep repeating the same mistake. If you can leave, then leave." In modern life, you're surrounded by invisible norms. Keep a stable job, stay in a long-term relationship, don't do anything too unusual. But you weren't born to live for a false sense of safety. If your current environment is depleting your core values, you have a responsibility to change, not because you're selfish, but because you have a duty to live truthfully. Patience is not a virtue if it makes you wither. Sometimes courage isn't about enduring longer. It's about standing up and saying, "I need a different direction." And no, you don't need anyone's permission. Not from society, not from family, not from social media. You only need to be honest with what you feel inside and act as though you deserve a different life, because you truly do. No one is designed to remain still forever. And if you feel stuck, blocked, drained, remember this: you're not rooted. You can leave. And sometimes courage begins with something as simple as one step forward. 10. If you're afraid of something, maybe that's exactly where you need to go. Fear is a strange sensation. It makes your heart race, your body tense, your thoughts spiral. But more importantly, it often points precisely to where you need to go. The things you fear most are often the very things you desire most. To speak your truth, to leave a toxic relationship, to start over, to pursue a path no one else believes in. But instead of stepping forward, you freeze. You rationalize your fear. Call it realism. Call it safety. Call it, I'm not ready. Stoics don't believe in waiting until you're ready. They believe in training the mind to move, even while trembling. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And he was right. Most of the time, what you fear is not the action itself, but the feeling in your mind about what might happen. In a society obsessed with certainty, Stoicism acts as a reminder. If you're avoiding something, then perhaps that very thing holds your freedom. Because true freedom doesn't come from avoiding risk. It comes from knowing exactly what you fear and walking forward anyway. You might fear rejection, fear failure, fear not being good enough. But each time you retreat because of fear, you're teaching your mind that the fear is correct, that you're weak, that you're not capable. On the other hand, each time you step into that hazy unknown, even trembling, you redraw the map of your inner world. Fear will never disappear, but if you see it as a compass instead of a wall, you'll begin to truly live. Because behind fear lives the stronger version of you. And perhaps the real fear isn't failure. It's living your entire life without ever discovering who you could have become. 11. Don't seek peace in the place that once broke you. There is a mistake many people make again and again. Not out of foolishness, but out of hope. They return to the places that once hurt them, believing this time might be different. They go back to the person who once made them cry, back to the job that once drained them, back to the city that once made them feel lost. They think if they just try harder, be more patient, love a little more, things will get better. But the Stoic does not. The Stoic does not cling to false hope. They believe in reason, and reason says, the place that once disoriented you is not where you should return to find your way. Seneca once wrote, "You cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick." In modern life, people become so attached to the familiar that they call it safety, even if it makes them suffer every single day. They hold on to strained relationships, recycled conversations, old apologies, and promises never fulfilled, all because they fear the emptiness that follows leaving. But the truth is, the emptiness of leaving might be frightening, but it isn't dangerous. What's dangerous is staying and calling it love, calling it patience, calling it sacrifice. Stoicism doesn't promote cutting ties without thought. It promotes recognizing when you are draining yourself for something that has expired. You have the right to forgive, but that doesn't mean you have to return. You can be at peace, but that peace doesn't have to exist in the place that once shattered you. Healing doesn't always come from fixing the old. Sometimes it begins when you choose to rebuild, somewhere new with a renewed spirit. And if you are brave enough to leave, you are not just refusing pain. You are choosing yourself again. Peace does not live where it is familiar. It lives where you dare to choose differently. 12th, anger is fire, and you are always the first to burn. Anger always arrives wearing the mask of righteousness. You feel insulted, misunderstood, betrayed, pushed to your limits. You believe you have every right to be angry, every reason to react. And sometimes you're right. But the issue isn't whether you're right or not. The issue is this. Every time you let anger take control, you are the first to burn. Anger scorches your reason, burns away your calm, and destroys the mindfulness you've worked hard to build each day. Stoicism doesn't deny the emotion of anger, but it never lets anger lead. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Remember, when you are angry, it is you who is hurt, not the other person." Stoicism doesn't ask you to be a saint. It only teaches you to observe your anger, to strip it down, to see what lies beneath the explosion. Perhaps an old wound, an unspoken expectation, or a bruised sense of pride. In modern life, anger is often celebrated as a sign of strength. The louder voice is seen as the more powerful one. The quicker comeback is seen as the sharper mind. But in truth, anger is often uncontrolled emotion in disguise, and the cost of that lack of control is high. Broken relationships, words you can't take back, actions that leave long shadows. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're harming yourself first. The Stoics don't want you to suppress your anger. They want you to see through it, to realize that behind that powerful reaction is often a wound that hasn't yet healed. Anger isn't wrong, but it shouldn't be the one steering. You can feel anger without destroying. You can respond without shouting, because sometimes real strength isn't in reacting quickly, but in choosing stillness when you have every reason to erupt. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous in the most composed way. 13. Move as if failure doesn't exist in your vocabulary. There's a subtle kind of failure that no one talks about. Failing because you never fully committed to the path. Not because you lacked ability, not because you lacked opportunity, but because you moved forward in a state of hesitation. You started with the mindset of, let's see, maybe it'll work. If it doesn't, I'll just walk away. You always kept an exit, but here's the truth. When you keep an exit, you'll use it. The Stoics never act with a trial run mentality. They act as if it's necessary. Marcus Aurelius emphasized, act with urgency. Do what needs to be done as if it were the last thing you'll ever do. Not because they had absolute confidence, but because they understood. Your inner state when you begin determines how far you can go. In today's world, where everything has a shortcut, instant success, crash courses, commitment-free love, the let's try attitude is seen as safe, even open-minded. But in truth, nothing meaningful is ever built by someone who's unwilling to commit fully. You can't succeed at your work if you keep thinking, I'll try this for a few months and then decide. You can't build a solid relationship if your mindset is, if it doesn't work, I'll leave. And you absolutely can't overcome yourself if from the start you tell yourself, I'm not sure I can do this. Stoicism doesn't teach you to be deluded about success. It teaches you to be wholehearted. Because once you've chosen, your actions are not a test. They are your truth. If you fall, you learn. If you're wrong, you adjust. But no step is taken with indifference. You don't need to guarantee success. You only need to guarantee that if you look back later, you'll know you gave it your all. And when you act as if failure has no place in your vocabulary, not because you're invincible, but because you refuse to retreat too soon, then regardless of the outcome, you've already conquered yourself. 14. Silence is not retreat. It is the choice of the strong. People often confuse silence with weakness. They mistake not reacting for surrender. They equate not speaking with having nothing to say, but the Stoics understood this clearly. Silence is not a lack. It is controlled power. When someone insults you, misunderstands you, spreads falsehoods about you, your first instinct is to speak up, defend yourself, demand fairness. But not everything deserves an explanation. Not everyone is capable of hearing the truth, and not every battle is worth your energy. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best answer to anger is silence." Silence is not agreement. It's the refusal to step into toxic energy. In the age of social media, where everyone has a voice, where everyone feels compelled to say something, where everyone believes they must respond, silence has become a powerful act because it requires self-control, the ability to rise above the ego, and the strength to stay out of emotional quicksand. When someone is trying to provoke you, when your workplace is full of drama, when an ex tries to pull your strings again, you don't need to say a word to prove anything. Not reacting doesn't mean you don't know. Not responding doesn't mean you're wrong. Saying nothing doesn't mean you can't. Sometimes silence is the clearest and most painful response because it shows that you no longer need to explain yourself. Stoicism doesn't teach avoidance. It teaches discernment because the one who speaks the most doesn't always understand the most. And the one who stays silent isn't always losing. They're simply playing on a different level. In a noisy world, calm and silence are the behaviors of someone who understands the value of inner peace. And sometimes the most elegant form of disdain is an unshakable silence. 15. Forgive quietly and leave without drama. Not everyone who hurt you deserves a speech about your pain. Not every relationship that ends needs a dramatic farewell. Not every act of forgiveness needs to be spoken to be real. The Stoic chooses to forgive in silence, not because they are weak, but because they understand this. Nothing is more noble than gently letting go of what once felt unbearably heavy. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Let others live wrongly. Your part is to live rightly." In a world where everything must be declared, displayed, witnessed, and validated online, forgiving without needing a conversation, leaving without needing a grand conclusion has become an act of maturity. Forgiveness doesn't mean you agree with what happened. It simply means you refuse to let the pain keep running your mind. You let go, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve freedom. And leaving without drama is when you realize that loud noise doesn't make a decision more right. In modern life, people confuse intense emotion with authenticity. But the Stoics understand quiet action is often the deepest reflection of inner clarity. When you forgive someone in your heart, they don't need to know. When you choose to walk away from something toxic, you don't need to explain. No anger, no tears, no stage. Only resolve, carried with calm, because that's when you're no longer acting out of pain, but from reason. And when you are strong enough to need no one's understanding, no one's approval, no one's apology, you have truly grown. Letting go needs no applause. Forgiveness needs no declaration. Freedom doesn't need to be loud. It only needs one thing, that you choose yourself fully and quietly. Conclusion: clear-minded enough to act, calm enough not to be swept away. You've moved through each layer of the inner journey, from clearing the mind, learning not to react unconsciously, facing pain and failure, letting go, forgiving, to choosing to walk away in silence. Each part didn't promise you an easier life, but it gave you a clearer way to live. Because Stoicism wasn't born to make you cold. It doesn't turn you into someone numb, nor someone who rejects love, denies joy, or disconnects from the world. Stoicism simply helps you release the need to control everything. It gives you strength, not to rule over others, but to remain grounded in yourself amid constant change. It's a quiet strength no one teaches in school. You don't need to shout, don't need to declare, don't need to prove anything. You only need to be clear-headed enough to know what's worth doing and calm enough not to be drawn into what isn't. Because in the end, life is not measured by how many times someone else validates you, but by how many times you return inward. Choose what is right, even when no one is watching. And if there is one thing Stoicism truly teaches you, it is this. Freedom begins the moment you no longer need to control anyone, not even yourself. You simply steer, gently, but unwavering, quietly, but with enough force to shift the course of your life.